Dajahan, hi guys, it's Shanae and welcome back to my channel. And today I'm continuing my read along for Moldu, and as you can silent reading, my bad. And as you can hear, the mic is back on, which means that if I bump it, I will injure your ears, but it also hopefully means that you guys will be able to hear me again properly this time around. Sorry about last stream. I hope it wasn't too much of a deterrent. I honestly don't know what makes the difference sometimes versus others, but I am just glad it's working again. I hope that it's not just me thinking it's working and that it's actually still not working. But yeah, if you're new here, hi, I'm Janae. I read Danmei, and currently we are busy with the fan translation volume 4 of silent reading. I have now also updated the links in the description so you can order and pre-order volume 1, 2, and 3 of Mordu. It seems like either there are only gonna be 3 volumes of the official translation, or that only 3 volumes have been slated so far. I'm not 100% sure, but hi, good to see you again. And yeah, so anyway, just in case anyone is curious, so far the art for it has been beautiful, and I can't wait to get my hands on it when it does become available over here. So yeah, that is more or less it. We take a break on the hour for 10 minutes, and I just use that to stretch my legs, get new coffee or tea, all of that. And we are gonna try for 3 hours today, but at the very least we're doing 2. One of the things is kind of like depending on how the weather goes, because it has been very stormy recently, and I don't know how that's gonna affect the audio quality. It might start, like there might be lightning. It's a whole thing. Been a bit busy. I mean, everyone has a life. So I'm glad you're back. So yeah, okay. I think I have stalled enough. I think we can get going. And also, if all goes well, there's gonna be 3 live streams this week. So one today, one Thursday, and then one Saturday. That is the plan. Fingers crossed we get there, because we need to finish this before I go on holiday, and I don't know, like, this volume. And I don't know if I'm gonna manage it, but we're gonna try. Okay, let's get going. Let me also just, hi! Let me just pop out the chats as well so I can see what you guys are saying as we go. Okay. Chapter 104, Verhovensky 14. Dumbstruck, Lo and Joel watched Feydeau, hands in his pockets, walk into the room. He changed into clothes of an academic style. There was even a book stuck under his arm to complete the disguise. Knocking lightly on the doorframe, Feydeau swept his gaze over the whole criminal investigation team, which was giving off an air of needing support, and issued a collective nod in greeting. Is my desk still in its place? Though Feydeau hadn't spent very long at the criminal investigation team, since ancient times it had been true that it was easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but difficult to go from extravagance to frugality. Not wrong. There was no harm if there was nothing to compare with. Everyone remembered the midnight snack, especially delivered by the 6-star hotel, and the endless drinks and snacks. Under the influence of this powerful sugar-coated bullet, they'd nearly developed a conditional reflex. On seeing this handsome man, their first reaction was to secretly start salivating. I mean, I think Lo and Joe can relate to that, but not for the same reason. Lo and Joe looked on as his unworldly lackeys displayed their atrocious behavior, occupying his office and clustering around Feydeau as though welcoming a household god of wealth. Then he finally came around. No wonder when he told Feydeau not to come pick him up last night, the wretched child had agreed so readily. Taran tapped on his shoulder from behind. Lowering his voice, he said to Lo and Joel, "Are you two spicing things up?" I keep forgetting that Taran is aware of the relationship, and then every time he casually refers to said knowledge, it throws me off. Lowenjo at once restrained his lost expression and displayed an unfathomable coolness, meaningfully saying to Taran, "Oh, you, a person like you, sitting at home all day fantasizing about a wife, pres- presently belongs to the criminal stage of socialism. Do you understand? Criminal. Is that supposed to be criminal? Is that a word that exists and I have just never seen it? Probably. You haven't even managed being well fed and clothed, and you're going after cultural and ideological attainments. Spicing things up has nothing to do with you. Taran. Dot dot dot. With deliberate impatience, Lowenjo looked at his watch. Only coming over at this hour. Was he reserving a table at the dining hall? You really can't do anything with him. Sounds like you're a little bit jealous. Taran maintained his smile, earnestly pondering how to break off relations. Weren't you just going to pay home visits to those runaway students? That's right. Lowenjo waved his invisible tail. If I weren't waiting for him, I'd have left already. He's holding me up. Fedu, don't waste time. If there's anything you need to sign, put it in order right away. Taran watched Lo and Joe pull apart the crowd to go into the room and grab Fedu. He really couldn't resist smiling, feeling that his two anxieties had cancelled each other out, like fighting fire with fire. He truly felt at ease. But his easy smile hadn't yet fully formed when the phone in his pocket vibrated. Taran fished it out to look and saw that Chang Ling had sent him a message. Okay, quick thing. And I'm gonna lift my hand as an indication of a potential spoiler warning, but I also don't want confirmation or denial on this theory because then the little bit of surprise that I might have would be spoiled. So I'm just putting that out there as a thought, and we'll find out what happens later on. This is with regards to the end of the show. We see Taran and I'm assuming it's Changming, the girl who he went on a date with. We see them kind of talking, and there's this hint that she was pretending to be with him for some or other reason, and it's never resolved or clarified why they would need to pretend to be in a relationship. But in hindsight, I kind of wonder if that's an Easter egg that the director left for us as like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. They pretended to be together so that Taran could force both Lo and Jo and Feidu to move on, and that actually, that they weren't together this entire time, and he just wanted them to move on, and they happened to move on with each other. Um, and then after the show, maybe they do end up together, show slash book. So that's my current theory because it was so strange that she seemed like she was somehow part of the scheme, and then we never got a resolution on what was actually going on there. Um, so yeah, it might be that it's involved with some things that they had to take out of the show that aren't specifically censorship related, but more like time constraint related. Uh, but yeah, I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. Okay, Chang Ning said, my friend gave me 2 tickets to a water acrobatics performance this weekend. She just ditched me the last minute. Do you want to come? Like someone suffering from dyslexia, Taran spent 10 minutes reading this short message, wanting nothing better than to pull every word apart and chew it over, swallowing it down into his belly. Chang Ning wasn't one of those forward young ladies. Even when she was inviting him to see a performance, she had to first give a long string of reasons, and for her, this was already a clear display of her intentions. But when Lao Yang had been alive, he talked quite a lot with Taran. Each time he'd seen Lo Wenzhou's revolting "why the hell am I so handsome" attitude, he'd wanted to complain about him and couldn't calm down. Not long before his death, Lao Yang had shown Taran a picture on his phone of his daughter's university admission notice, showing off. Then, thinking of something, he'd suddenly sighed and said to Taran, "A blink of an eye, and my child is so grown up. My generation has muddled its way through more than half of our lifetime. I remember when her mother first agreed to marry me. It was my superior who introduced us. I felt so happy then, thinking that I'd somehow managed to trick myself a wife and I wouldn't have to be a bachelor anymore. I didn't think of anything else. Now I think I was too careless. I only thought about how good she was. I didn't know I was a burden." Ooh. At the time, Taran had laughed and ridiculed the old fellow for bragging while pretending to complain, and hadn't taken it to heart. He'd only thought back to it long after, understanding what he'd meant. In times of peace, who didn't want a family to spend his days with, a wife and kids and a warm house? But in times of danger, you'd want nothing better than to be a monkey who'd emerged spontaneously from a crack in a stone, again with the Journey to the West references, without father or mother, without family or friends, a barefoot ruffian, stark naked and free of cares. Taran sighed softly. As his colleagues babbled next to him, he deleted the "all right" he'd nearly sent, and instead replied, "I'm sorry, I have to work overtime this weekend." I get Taran's feelings and concerns, but at the same time, like, cops are allowed to have families too and emotional wants and needs. I just think it's a very trying type of career, so you have to have a certain kind of personality to be a cop and a certain personality to be the significant other of a cop and still make it work. He wants to use the weekend to secretly go see Shenyang. Why did I almost read shenanigans? My bad. Shenyang. Even if Shenyang wouldn't see him, and drop some things off to display mm, his kindly intentions. The photographs Liang had left behind were still waiting for him to investigate, and there were also those shocking phrases. Taran pinched the center of his brow, feeling that in his bones he wasn't the sort of person who did great things. As soon as he took anything to heart, he'd be uneasy night and day. tossing and turning endlessly. In spite of himself, he envied Lo-Wen-jo, could use the sky as a blanket if it came falling down. I mean, not everyone can be a Lo-Wen-jo, but I don't think that means that you need to short sell yourself. 10 minutes later, Lo-Wen-jo, wrapped in his comforter, the thickness of the sky, kidnapped the criminal investigation team's chief financial backer. President Faye, I bet you've never gotten a telling off in your life. He's known you long enough that I'm sure you've made up for it at some points, Lo-Wen-jo said, sitting in the car. Come on, I'll take you to get a telling off. The Xingfu Garden Estate in Hongzhi Road. Turn on the GPS if you're not familiar with it. Let's go. Lo-Wen-jo had thought all along that if there was anyone who could say anything useful, it would be the pudgy little Zhang Yifan. So he was planning to go talk to him again. These students had already been questioned at the city bureau the day before, and today Xiao Haiyang and the others had gone over again. The parents were already out of patience. They might agree once or twice, but not a third time. Going again this time, even using his belt to think, Lo-Wen-jo could imagine the expressions the parents would make. Um, I don't know if you're part of the live stream, but if you are, thank you for becoming a Cozy Cats member. I hope you enjoy it. Where were we? As Lo-Wen-jo considered this, he opened Xiao Haiyang's record and political Hold on, let's try this again. As Lo-Wen-jo considered this, he opened Xiao Haiyang's record and political examination, which he'd gotten from HR. Xiao Haiyang's parents had divorced, and his mother had died of illness. His father had had custody of him before he'd grown to adulthood. His father and stepmother ran a car dealership, and he had a younger half-brother who was about to take his university entrance exams. His family circumstances were all right, but they weren't wealthy. The family was all ordinary people. No close relatives had been involved in a crime, died a violent death, or even had any background with the public security authorities. He himself had graduated a few years ago, and his background was clean and simple, so there wasn't much material. Lo-Wen-jo frowned. This was strange. Feidu glanced at him out of the corner of his eye. He didn't ask what he was reading, only pointed out to him, "We're almost there." Lo-Wen-jo closed Xiao Haiyang's file and looked up at the big field of high-quality estates up ahead, temporarily calling back his thoughts. He gave a frustrated sigh and said, "How about this? You pretend to go to the bathroom and come back when they're done throwing their tantrum." Feidu unhurriedly drove ahead according to the GPS. "Don't worry, as long as there's a female member of the household, I won't get a telling off." This man's confidence definitely doesn't need fixing. Dot dot dot. Lo-Wen-jo reached over and put a hand on his waist. "Seducing a married woman right in front of my face, little whelp, you must not want to live anymore." Feidu smiled silently. However, President Fei didn't have an opportunity to seduce a married woman. When they knocked on Zhang Yifan's door, the trembling boy indicated that his parents weren't home. They'd gone out for the evening to a dinner party. What is it with kids in these shows and novels admitting to being home alone? Have they never had like a lesson on stranger danger from their parents? Even when people say they are like police officers, still, maybe I'm jaded. Mm. The adults were usually busy, so they'd paid a great price to send their child to a boarding school, entrusting the teachers with full responsibility. this couldn't be taken as not caring about the child. When they'd spent so much money, how could they not care? I have some feelings about that, but sure. As long as his grades and his manners were good, they'd reward him, buy him things. If he did something wrong, dared to run away, then of course he'd have to be punished. Punished by going without meals. That's like everything else is technically could be child neglect in terms of emotional damage that it does, but going without meals is legit, like measurable child neglect. Having his allowance taken away, being shut into the house to reflect on himself. Clearly distinguished rewards and punishments. A principled education. As for what the adolescent child was thinking, that wasn't important. What valuable ideas could a group of little whelps have? There were children starving in Africa. I I hate that. I hate that very much. And I can speak about it because I am in Africa. Um, what did this child, who could have anything he wanted, have to quarrel about? Do sit down. Zhang Yifan was rather polite. He poured water for them. He was only very shy with strangers, unwilling to look up and meet his guests' eyes, sitting in front of them looking as dejected as though he were being interrogated. Some other police officers came by today. Do you want to ask the same questions? Wenzhou looked him up and down. Do you still remember me? Zhang Yifan looked at him quickly, then nodded. I would certainly hope so. Then I can at least in my mind justify a little bit why he was so careless in letting them in. Yeah, priest's sarcasm is fantastic. Lo Winjaw slowed his voice. I don't know whether you've heard. Last night, Shaman slipped out of the hospital and climbed up to the rooftop. Zhang Yifan was surprised, immediately raising his head, his hands squeezing into fists. Oh, we rescued her. Winjaw made a gesture. Just a little more and she'd have jumped off the building. First, Zhang Yifan let out a big sigh of relief. Then he hurriedly followed up. Is she all right? I appreciate the genuine care. She wasn't injured, Lowenjo said, watching the boy's reaction, then adding, although after we brought her back, she admitted to us that she colluded with the murderer who killed Thong Bin, that she was the one who wanted to kill Thong Bin. You guys are already over 14, so I don't think that can be called being all right. Zhang Yifan first opened his eyes wide and blurted, No! Then all the blood drained clean out of his face. Zhang Yifan clenched his teeth. In the, in the abundantly heated room, sweat gathered at the tip of his nose. Just then, Fei Du put in a word. Do you also like Sha Sha Man? His words were like a restless spark. The pudgy boy's face went from white to red, and he closed his mouth tightly, holding himself back so fiercely he seemed about to explode. But when Lo and Joe thought he wouldn't be able to hold back any longer, the boy suddenly looked at Feidu, gaze flitting over his coat, worn open, his wristwatch, and his indolent but alert posture. In that instant, Feidu clearly read fear in the boy's eyes. As Feidu stared, Zhang Yifan, like a balloon with the air let out, shriveled up in front of their eyes, tightly covering his mouth. Then, unable to sit still, the boy seemed to arrive at some decision. He stood up and went into his bedroom. A moment later, he came out carrying 2 envelopes and pushed them in front of Lo and Joe and Feidu. That was such a good description. Lorenzo took them in astonishment and opened them to have a look. He found that there were 2 bank cards inside. On those is the education fund my mom deposited for me and the New Year's money I've saved up since I was little. The pin is the same for both cards. It's my birthday, the date you recorded at the police bureau. There should be 300,000 altogether. Oh, and there should also be some interest. Jung Fan struggled to sit upright, using posture he must have learned from some traitor to the nation bribing an enemy agent in a TV drama, clumsily lowering his voice to say his lines. I'd like to ask you to look after Shasha Nan. She's not that kind of person. There must be some misunderstanding here. No, and Joel. Dot dot dot. They do. Dot dot dot. I didn't think being bribed was on either of theirs bingo cards or attempted bribery. This was a moment that could truly go down in history. The largest sum of money and goods Captain Law had ever been offered as a bribe in his career, and the briber was a minor. Where were today's children learning these things from? I'm debating telling a story. Maybe I shouldn't. I feel like, oh, what does it matter? Like, it's not like anyone would be able to figure out who the police officer is. I don't even know myself. Um, Directly after I had gotten or been notified that my driver's license was at the place where you go to pick up your driver's license, I drove there, and I'm, very new to the driving thing, not familiar with the area. So I'm just focusing on like the GPS, no idea what my speed limit was. I'm pretty sure I was fine. But a police officer pulls me to a stop like right outside the learning center where you pick up your driver's license. I swear they park there because they know, you're new and you're naive to everything. And I have no idea what's going on. Like, I don't know how this works. So I ask him, I'm like, okay, so what do we do now? He's like, you sped 70 in a 60 zone. I'm like, okay, but what do we do? I don't know. Like, how does this work? And this man's like, oh, how much do you have in your wallet? And I'm like, I don't know. Let me quickly just call my mom and find out what am I supposed to do? And he's like, oh, no, 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 it's okay. You can go. And only afterwards did I realize he was trying to get me to bribe him. So there's my story of bribery. Well, failed bribery. My mom was like, I don't know, just tell him to write you a ticket. I'm like, okay, my mom says you need to write me a ticket. And he's like, oh, no, no, it's okay. You can go. Anyway, fun. Sorry, that was so random. Okay, where were we? We were at the bribery. Lorenzo tapped gently with his fingers, returning the bank cards to the envelopes. You won't tell me the real reason you ran away. Won't you tell me about Feng Bin and Sa Son Man's relationship? And won't tell me, oh, sorry, won't tell me about Feng Bin and Sha Shanan's relationship, and won't tell me who had a grievance against Feng Bin at school. And you want to use these things to have me do what? Privately let Sha Shanan go? Lorenzo sighed wearily. Darling, are you crazy? Oh, okay. Chapter 105, Verhoevenski 15. Fat little Zhang Yifan looked foolishly at Lo Wenzhou. Lo Wenzhou put the envelopes on the table. He laughed angrily. You want to buy off a police officer with 300,000? Isn't that pretty ridiculous? Zhang Yifan didn't hear this was a joke. He actually took it for the truth. His round little face showed a trace of the panic of someone who had come to his wits' end. He haltingly said, "But this is really all I have." This poor kid, I understand that it's obviously not good to bribe police officers, but he's so young and clueless, it feels. Where did you learn this from? Encounter any trouble and you pull out two cards to deal with it? Lowendral's smile gradually cooled. He looked sternly at the boy. You think you can resolve a murder with money? What wretched teacher taught you this? Tell me, and I'll have them out of education tomorrow. What if it was his parents? At home, Zhang Yifan was afraid of his dad. Outside, he was also afraid of stern and powerful men like his father. He was scared silent as a cicada in winter by law and jaw, not making a sound. Again, another beautiful descriptor. If Shao Shannan killed someone, it doesn't matter whether she did it with her own hands or colluded with someone else. She still has to pay the price. Covering up from the police where a criminal who's been wanted for 15 years has gone, colluding with a wanted criminal, harming a classmate, what kind of resentment warrants such deranged behavior? With each sentence Lowendraw spoke, the boy's face grew whiter. Never mind killing someone, there's also dismemberment. Yeah, thank you for reminding me about that. I had forgotten the poor kid was dismembered. That day at City Bureau, the police had only questioned them. They hadn't told the students the details of Feng Bin's death. The teacher and parents, of course, wouldn't have mentioned such bloody things either. Zhang Yifan had been locked up since coming home and hadn't yet returned to school. Suddenly hearing the word dismemberment, he was so scared he jumped off the couch. Dismemberment? Feng Bin was Luandro was very much wanted to, why am I struggling so much? Sorry. Luandro very much wanted to describe how Feng Bin had looked in death, but when the words reached his lips, he looked at that very childish face and swallowed them down. He only asked, "Why did you want to run away? Who egged you on? Who wanted to hurt Feng Bin?" N- no one. No one wanted to hurt him. Zhang Yifan shook his head over and over again, as if he'd learned his lines 1,000 times over. He blurted out, "We went to celebrate Christmas." Feidu put his cup on the table and quietly interrupted Zhang Yifan. "Christmas?" he asked. "What's special about Christmas?" Zhang Yifan was like a squirrel with its neck squeezed. His pupils contracted, and he curled up. A frightening silence spread through the exquisitely decorated living room of his home. After a good while, the boy couldn't hold back no longer. He began to sob unrestrainedly. "I'll call your parents." Lorenzo reached out to pick up his phone from the table. "What are they doing attending a dinner party? Are they dining with the chairman?" Zhang Yifan threw himself at him immediately, holding Lowenjaw back with both hands. I mean, we know he wouldn't actually call the parents because then this questioning would end super abruptly. Zhang Yifan threw himself at him immediately, holding Lowenjaw back with both hands. His palms were soaked with sweat, sticking to the back of Lowenjaw's hand. They were ice cold. Lorenzo felt that his 10 fingers together didn't feel like those of a 15 or 16-year-old strapping young man, but instead those of a weak and clumsy lost child. Because he lacked strength, he couldn't even trust his own fingers, instinctively used his whole hand when gripping things, as if that was the only way he would get a firm grip. Don't call... The pudgy boy squeezed the words out from his Viscera. I'm scared. What are you scared of? Feidu didn't turn a hair. Seeing Zhang Yifan immediately look away after inadvertently meeting his gaze, he keenly asked, "Are you scared of me? Or some person who's a lot like me?" That is an interesting observation. I don't know if we had that observation in the show because, funnily enough, the guy that they picked to represent one of the people, like if you've watched the show, you'll know what I mean, does indeed somewhat resemble Pei Su. Like, they do definitely have a similar vibe for me. Though that guy reads a lot colder because we, as an audience, know Pei Su more intimately at this point. Zhang Yifan, Bo and Joel continued in a low voice. "What was it you wanted to tell me yesterday at the city bureau?" Zhang Yifan was sobbing so hard he could barely sit still. He twitched all over, failing again and again to spit out clear speech. Feidu looked him over. The boy wasn't tall. He had small features, a pleasant and fortuitous appearance. Oh, that's a nice description. Because he'd run away, he wasn't wearing his school uniform. His t-shirt was pulled tight over his body, a somewhat round little belly sticking out. Over the little belly was Superman, flexing his biceps. On the back of the shirt was a huge fist. Looking only at the packaging, you would have thought that the cloth covered a body full of strength, that of a great and powerful man of ample proportions. Zhang Yifan's bedroom was visible from the living room couch. The bedroom door wasn't closed. Behind the door hung a decorative sandbag and a pair of boxing gloves. There were superhero movie posters stuck to the wall. A corner of the bed was visible too. It had a roaring mountain lion printed on it, looking out from the bed with incomparable disdain. Zhang Yifan's living space was so uniform that even the little posters displayed his parents' inexpressible expectations for him. They would have loved to turn into a knife blade, pare the fat of his body by any means necessary, pare him down into a Mike Tyson, into a Wolverine, into an indomitable real man with skin of copper and bones of iron. But things turned out contrary to their wishes. The child was still a trembling crybaby. "That's rude." "Do you like Superman?" Feidu suddenly asked. You can nod or shake your head. Zhang Yifan looked at him evasively, gave a forceful whimper, and shook his head. "Oh, I get it. Your mom and dad like to buy you clothes with Superman on them, right? There is always some discrepancy between your way of thinking and your parents'. I mean, that's an understatement of the century where Feidu is concerned. When I was little, I also often ran counter to my father's expectations." At this point, Feidu paused slightly. Lowenjul subconsciously looked at him, saw that his voice was gentle, and there was a smile at the corners of his mouth, as if talking about a childhood experience in which warmth and contradiction coexisted. There was no sign that he was making anything up. Feidu continued. At those times, we'd often have to come to terms. You have to be brought up by someone, right? But I also had my own means of rebelling. Zhang Yifan, weeping, stared abjectly at him. Feidu smiled at him. "I'll tell you about it in a while. Did you go to Yifan for junior middle school too?" Zhang Yifan nodded. Junior middle school belongs to the 9 years of compulsory education. Public schools ordinarily don't charge fees for it, but your school does. And they're expensive, right? I heard that there is a special Western restaurant in your school cafeteria. Feidu asked the boy some questions as though making idle chat, all questions that could be answered with a nod or a shake of his head. Zhang Yifan's rapid breathing gradually calmed. Feidu considered his expression, reckoning that he was about ready to speak normally. Thereupon, he scooped up some sugar cubes from the odds and ends basket under the coffee table and put them into Zhang Yifan's cup, picking up the teapot next to him, and poured some hot water for him, waiting patiently for him to drink most of it before he tossed out the next question. I can't help but think about the sugar water that Rowan Jaw gave him in moments of stress and wonder if he took some inspiration from that. Feidu's observation skills and deductions, then subsequent manipulation, is awesome as usual. Very true. Feidu said, "Do you like school?" Zhang Yifan paused, then shook his head hard. Feidu leaned forward slightly, leaning his elbows on his knees, bringing his line of sight even with Zhang Yifan's. He slowed his voice. "Have you been bullied at school?" This time Zhang Yifan was silent for a longer time, then he shook his head very firmly. As if weighing something, Feidu folded a sugar cube wrapper over and over, considering the pudgy boy's expression. Zhang Yifan had more or less calmed down. There had been no fluctuation in emotion during his silence just now. Judging by his body language, he seemed to have just been recalling. When he'd shaken his head, his movements hadn't been at all forced. Either it was true, or he believed he hadn't been bullied. Feidu said, "Then have Feng Bin, Xia Xiaonan, and the others been bullied?" At first Zhang Yifan nodded, then he hesitated for a moment, and shook his head, quietly saying, "Feng Bin wasn't bullied. He was with them, but he wasn't the same. He was pretty nice." Feidu's fingers, tapping on the wrapper, paused. Feng Bin had been with them. He'd belonged to the faction of bullies. They got their eyes on Xia Xiaonan, Zhang Yifan said without introduction or conclusion. "We had to run. That was what Feng Bin said." His words were disconnected, but Law and Joe somehow heard something ghastly behind them. He followed up, "Who got their eyes on Xia Xiaonan?" "Them. The masters." Ugh. Ugh. Law and Joe nearly suspected his own ears had gone on the fritz. What? "Who? The masters? Then what on earth are you? A slave?" "I'm not a slave. I'm an ordinary person. A commoner," Zhang Yifan said quietly. "Wang Shao and the others are the slaves." Oh, that's so messed up. Like, even knowing some of what's to come, it's still messed up. Aside from Feng Bin and Xia Xiaonan, there were 4 other students who'd run away. Wang Shao was the one girl among them. Shao Haiyang and his colleagues had been turned away at the door by the girl's parents because she'd had a fever and they hadn't seen her. "Wang Shao was the girl who was with you guys?" Seeing Zhang Yifeng nod, Hu Zhuo asked, "You said Wang Shao and the others. Who are the others? The other 2 boys?" Zhang Yifeng nodded again. "Masters, commoners, and slaves." Hu Zhuo repeated the appellations he'd heard come out of Zhang Yifeng's mouth, feeling an aura of middle school hit him hard in the face. It was simply rather absurd. These brats seemed to be earnestly playing a large-scale real-life version of a board game, but there was a chill unceasingly surging upward from his feet. "You mean that Feng Bin belonged with the masters, Wang Shao and the others belonged with the slaves, and only you are a commoner?" I've got that right, haven't I? So what is Shashanan? Shashanan is the deer. I forgot that descriptor, and it's horrible. Jung Fan squeezed the words out of his throat. His not yet fully developed voice thin as a thread, seeming about to collapse any time. Every year at Christmas, after the Christmas party organized by the English teachers, the students have their own activity. The school doesn't close for Christmas or New Year's, and the dormitories aren't locked up. We can play all night. Starting from junior middle school, each year there'd be Lo and Joel had a feeling that the activity wasn't a gathering together to play fight the landlord. I've never heard that game before. He asked at once, "Play all night? Play what?" "Play a hunting game, like the kind in Surviving the Game." Jung Fan involuntarily lowered his voice. "Every year they have a lottery before Christmas and pick 5 people out of the commoners um, who can participate in the hunting game, and if you win, you can join them." "Join them? You mean you can stop being an ordinary person and become one of the group of masters? What are the benefits of joining? You can bully whoever you want. If you join, you'll be safe," the pudgy boy said pitifully to Law and Jaw. "As long as you don't get into a disagreement with the other masters, then you won't be bullied at random, won't become a slave, and you won't somehow become prey. You can go to the cafeteria right away after class and don't have to avoid the masters. You can have the keys to your dormitory and the dormitory building and not have to be afraid of getting locked out. You can go to school in peace." I mean, yeah, I guess you could say the show made it melodramatic, but to me, it read more as feeling larger than life, which I think is a lot of the times how you feel when you're in middle school, and especially if you're not feeling safe in those years, because it's like everything just feels so magnified and intense and like it's the end of the world when and like you're not in control of your own life. I think also when if you have those kinds of disagreements in as an adult, it's so much easier to deal with. Mm. Unable to resist, you could only strive to join them in order to receive the treatment due to an ordinary student. Even during Yuan Shikai's restoration, he didn't dare to restore the Mongol dynasty system. "Your school students are really something," Lowenjul said slowly. "You were picked by the lottery this year?" Zheng Yifan looked at him, silently acknowledging it. Lowenjul said, "How do you play the hunting game of yours?" Zhang Yifan clenched his fists. The big clock in the living room went forward one step at a time, the ticking second hand moving with a metallic sound, going step by step towards the endless future. When it had made a long trek, Zhang Yifan finally got up enough courage to open his mouth. "After it starts, everyone participating in the game has to find the deer. They'll only announce who the deer is when the game starts. Before that, no one knows who it's going to be. After they've announced it, the deer has 5 minutes to run and hide, and then the hunters have until daybreak to catch them. Whoever catches them wins." It's always so interesting to me how disproportional it is as well. It's like, oh, you have 5 minutes to hide, and we have forever to find you. Your school is so big, with so many classrooms, buildings, and dormitories, with one person hiding and 5 people searching. How can they find them? Umandro asked. And a little girl like Shasha Nan, wouldn't she be able to find any random nook and hide all night? It's not 5 people searching, Fairy said lightly next to him. It's the whole school looking for her. Umandro froze at once, but Zhang Yifan nodded. The clique of bullies at the school held the right to speak, and the ordinary students were like common folk under a tyrant's despotic rule? I've never heard that word. Like Zhang Yifan, they only wanted to live in peace, only asked not to somehow become the person being bullied. Once they accepted this order, they would instinctively submit, like people who saw their classmates being bullied and felt discontented about it but only dared to look on from the sidelines. The people who could participate in the game were candidates. Each candidate was a stock with the potential to increase in value. Ugh. If you gave one of the candidates the critical information about the deer that he needed to join the clique, that person would naturally protect you. No, perhaps the more quick-witted would already have joined this certain person's faction before the start of the game. The 5 candidates in the so-called hunting game had all been chosen by lottery. The pudgy boy had obviously lied about this. Looking at his practiced conduct in attempting to bribe a police officer, you could just about deduce how he'd gotten his place. When the deer has been caught, they asked, what happens? Zhang Yifan's face was ashen. Oh. Okay, so we are basically on the hour. So I am gonna quickly take the 10-minute break. We'll be back like 8 past, 10 past. And then we're gonna go for at least another hour, hopefully 2. Okay, we're back, so hopefully the audio is still good. Just want to make sure everything's still fine over here. Cool. Okay, I think we can just immediately start again. Chapter 106, Verodinsky 16. Happy laughter and cheerful voices are everywhere. We can't see any of the tears these people hide behind their laughter. Demons. The female teacher's surname was Ge. Her name was Ge. She was around 40, wearing glasses, her makeup light, her speech refined and well-mannered. She was wearing a half-skirted coat. From her hair to her heels, all was dignified. So dignified, she hardly seemed like a middle school teacher. Being a core class teacher at a middle school, especially a homeroom teacher, meant having the sword of Damocles of university entrance rates hanging over your head. As soon as you opened your eyes, you'd feel you were a mentally and physically exhausted sheepdog corralling a group of blind, strayed lambs over a single plank bridge. That's a lot and sounds very intense. Frequently drowning in a snowstorm of exam papers. Very few people who dress themselves up well enough to be very few people would dress themselves up well enough to be able to take fashion shoots in the high street. No time, no energy, no proper setting, and no one to see, and no money. Those were the normal conditions of a female teacher's bitter life. Lowendraw calmly looked her over. As Fangden's homeroom teacher, Gurney, had been invited individually to cooperate with the investigation. This time, the person who received her had changed to the captain of the criminal investigation team. At first, Lowendraw spoke warmly, asking, "How long have you led the class, Teacher Ge?" Gurney answered in a soft voice, "I took it over less than half a year ago." "I see." Lowendraw nodded. "Are you familiar with the female student Wang Xiao?" Teacher Ge smiled slightly, not showing teeth. "There are 36 students altogether in our class. I have each student's circumstances in mind. Wang Xiao is a very well behaved and quiet girl. Her grades really aren't ideal at the moment, but she's always been very diligent, especially outstanding in English class. I heard this child only transferred to your school in junior middle year 3. Her studies weren't very good, so her family spent a great deal of money to enroll her in your school's international path. Yufan Middle School's direct road to study abroad was one of its tickets for recruiting students. Starting from junior middle and Starting from junior middle, the school had a certain proportion of foreign studies classes, and it had agreements with many foreign schools for studying abroad. Each year, during the winter and summer vacations, they organized winter and summer camps to take classes abroad. After the senior middle year 2, they even had a special team to assist in planning for study abroad. Aside from students they had for show, like Sha Shan Man, the majority of those who spent money to study at Yufeng were planning to go study abroad right after graduating senior middle. All parents have high expectations of their children. Teacher Go pushed at her glasses, which had slipped down, very aptly saying, "It's nothing for the adults. Have It's nothing." Okay, that's worded a bit strangely, so I'm just going to reword it for clarity's sake. I think it should say, it's nothing if the adults have to scrimp and save a little to give her the best education. I don't think it stopped at scrimping and saving. From what I understand, she must have used up all her family's resources. Lowendraw narrowed his eyes slightly. Your school's expenses are an overwhelming burden for us ordinary salaried workers. In Wang Xiao's situation, 90% of her parents' income will be going in tribute to the school, and they'll still have to use their family savings. With her grades, it will be difficult to test even into an ordinary undergraduate program. If she can't smoothly go abroad in the future, then won't her family have been ruined for nothing? I have very mixed feelings about this. Hearing this bitter argument, Teacher Ge agreed. That risk really is an objective reality, but Lowendraw didn't wait for her to finish talking. So the child is tantamount to carrying her whole family's hopes on her shoulders. No matter what, she can't leave school. No matter what, she has to smoothly complete her studies for the next few years, smoothly go abroad. Even if she's suffering from all kinds of bullying at school, even if she'd rather be dead, she still can't say a word at home. No matter how large her grievance, she still has to swallow it. Teacher, does that make sense to you? Gurney's expression altered slightly. Her lips shook. She was only now realizing that today's questioning wasn't routine. I have to say, I am a sucker for scenes where an adult or an authority figure stands up for someone who cannot, for whatever reason, stand up for themselves. And especially in these circumstances, it has nothing to do with a romantic attachment or a personal um, attachment to the person. It is just purely because Lowendraw's a good person and he's seeing what's going on and he cares enough to make a fuss. And obviously, he is also in a position of power enough to be able to make a fuss about it. Um, but yeah, I enjoy those kinds of things so much. Gurney's expression. Oh, wait, sorry, we read that already. Suffering from all kinds of bullying? She paused, then raised her long, shapely eyebrows very high, displaying excessive innocence and blankness. That's Captain Law, what are you talking about? Our class is all very friendly, one big happy family. Lowendraw expressionlessly finished her sentence. He leaned forward slightly and very oppressively said, Teacher Girth, do you know that the students organize their own activity after the Christmas party every year? Gunny pushed her glasses for a second time with a very short span. Yes, I know. Our school strongly emphasizes study abroad programs to help the students adjust to cultural differences in future. We encourage them to organize activities for Western holidays like Halloween and Christmas. It's tradition to let them stay out all night without locking up. They can arrange their own time and exchange sentiments with their classmates. Lowendraw interrupted her again. Exchange sentiments using the means of a hunting game. Hunting game? Gunny very quickly blinked her eyes a few times, then smiled. Who told you about that? I don't know what their game is called. Ah, children these days, they all like to play games that sound frightening, all about killing werewolves or werewolves killing, and really they're just playing cards. Lowendraw's gaze displayed a faint chill. I'm afraid the students in your class aren't only playing cards. Someone told me they play a game where one person hides and everyone hunts them down to kill them. That must make a lot of noise. And the school doesn't know about it at all? Fair point. Gunny gave an her smile didn't move a hair. But isn't that just hide and seek? She said lightly. Hide and seek. The games big children played often had similarities to the games of little children, only they were more complicated, trickier. Or toxic, one might say, in this regard. Yesterday evening, going back and forth, Lord Joe and Fedu had pried open pudgy little Zhang Yifan's mouth. Zhang Yifan had said that last Christmas the deer had been Wang Shao, who'd just transferred to Yifan. She'd had no idea what was going on then. She hid in the dormitory's public bathroom. Before hiding, without any vigilance, she'd spoken to another girl from her dorm. In the end, not 10 minutes later, a girl taking part in the game rushed in and dragged her out by the hair. Wang Shao hadn't known then that her nightmare had begun. The person who'd appointed the deer wasn't only responsible for hiding the people who'd been appointed the deer wasn't only responsible for hiding so people could catch her during the hunting game, it also meant that she would be excluded and despised by the school's mainstream. For a time, she would become the person everyone in the school could bully. When you had disputes with other classmates, there were always worries. Was this a person you could thoroughly offend? Would they be as easy to bully as they ordinarily seemed? What was their family background? Whose side would the teachers and others stand on? Did they belong to some clique? Did they have any friends you couldn't afford to offend? Therefore, you couldn't cheerfully turn hostile, even if you would have loved nothing more than to hack them to pieces. You still had to preserve appearances on the surface. But the deer was different. A government-sanctioned waste of space. Certainly very useless and loathsome. Dealing with this kind of person complied with the public opinion and justice. Everyone would be on your side, gasp in admiration at your sharp and bitter talent. You could find this person when you had nothing else to do to vent your frustration, even relieve stress, as well as contributing to promoting your friendlessness with the others, accomplishing many things at once. Friendliness, not friendlessness. I wish they would have friendlessness, then they might be less inclined. It's funny because the only reason that they're like, oh, you're the deer is because she doesn't have connections. If she had connections, they'd be staying far away from her, which shows that it's just like, I mean, we know this because this is just the standard of bullying everywhere, but it's just squashing someone else to make yourself feel big. Um, who didn't play hide and seek when they were little? Lorenzo crossed his arms in front of his chest, leaning back in his chair, looking loftily down on the delicate and pretty teacher across from him. Too bad he has Fedu. He is not gonna be swayed by this woman. I mean, too bad for her. Though the usual rules are that whoever gets caught has to do the catching in the next round. Perhaps it's my own inexperience, but I've never heard of the rules that say a person who gets caught has to drink from the toilet. Gunny said, "What?" "Last Christmas, in the so-called hide-and-seek of yours, some of her female classmates pulled Wang Xiao out of the bathroom by her hair. They had been forcing her to drink water from the toilet." When Wang Shao refused, your students, with their fraternal unity like one big happy family, stripped all your clothes off in the lobby of the girls' dormitories and let everyone watch. I'd be going out of my way if I was in Wondrel to prove which of the teachers knew and charging them with whatever they could possibly be charged for. Because this has to be like some kind of form of negligence and authority abuse. Lowendraw tossed a folder in front of Bernie. The corners of some photographs stuck out. Bernie instantly clutched the handbag on her knees. These are the photographs that were circulating among the students then. Would you like to take a look, Teacher Go? Bernie opened the folder, took one look, and instantly reached out to close it. The calm and composure on her face at last vanished altogether. That's true. I'm sorry, I didn't know about this. I wasn't their homeroom teacher then. I'll have to. In the first half of senior and middle year 1, Wang Shao was caught outside the dormitories by a patrolling teacher a dozen times because she was locked out at lights out and went roaming around. Because she didn't mend her ways, the school took disciplinary action against her. Lowendraw looked into the teacher's eyes. As homeroom teacher, you may not know the rest, but you must be aware of this. Gunny said, that about that I think that's strange, Teacher Ge. The girl was punished for constantly not returning to her dormitory. Why did you just tell me that she was well behaved and quiet? Those two certainly don't go together. Gurney forced a smile and gave a pale and powerless defense. I was afraid that if I spoke irresponsibly in front of the police, it would make the child look bad. Then you truly are sincere and responsible, a credit to China. Do you know why Wang Xiao went on purpose to take walks after lights out? Because when lights out was about to be called, people would throw her bedding and clean clothes out the window. If she went out to pick them up, the girl who had the keys would lock the doors to the dormitory and their floor. Why would the child rather be punished than tell a teacher on her parents? Because she knew whose territory the school was, and she knew the teacher's disposition. When she was being beat up, a teacher would walk by and pretend not to see her. Lowendraw gave Gurney absolutely no opportunity to speak, his cold gaze shooting towards her neatly made-up face. Teacher Ge, how do you think this degenerate fellow professional of yours should be dealt with? That is the worst, best thing to ask, because if you're guilty, the best thing for you to do is say the worst kind of punishments to show how serious you feel about this. But if you're guilty, you can't say the worst kind of punishment because inherently you will fear that same punishment being dealt to you. And that says a lot. Gurney said, I. Watching on the surveillance feed, Tyran looked at Fadu in shock. What on earth is this? Is this true? Or is Lalo fooling her? Fadu was reading through the roster of the Yufeng Middle School's entire senior and middle year 1 grade. Without looking up, he said, It's true. If they didn't want to be bullied by everyone, they had to attach themselves to some fellow student with power and become a slave. Otherwise, they might be chosen as the leader the following year. The majority of children chosen have weak natures. come from unremarkable families. In ordinary surroundings, children like these will also be somewhat ostracized. If you sacrifice these few people who won't resist, the remaining vast majority will attain a certain level of internal satisfaction. The tone of Taran's voice altered. Internal satisfaction. Fedu looked up at him, seeing the pure and kind-hearted Captain Tao's features were about to fly off his face. He couldn't help smiling. But then, restraining his smile, he said, "Internal satisfaction. Some children are followers. They think, I fit in. I'm united with everyone against a common enemy. Since everyone despises her, the problem must be with her. She deserves it." There are also some children who are cleverer, more clear-headed. They'll think, I have control. I'm not at the lowest level at school. Bullying her and ostracizing her will improve my social standing. With a target like Wang Shao, the social order in the school will be very stable, and it'll really be more unified. The child who set this up to begin with really is a genius. I don't know if I would call them a genius. I would maybe say they think themselves to be a genius. And they're very, very bored. Taran's shocked face clearly expressed, do you know what you're saying? Pedro knew he'd made a slip of the tongue. Calmly, he backtracked, adding, in the sarcastic sense. The child who revealed this to us yesterday said that the target chosen this year was Sha Shanan. Sha Shanan is more fortunate than Wang Shao, because she isn't an ordinary little girl. She's rather pretty. I kinda hate that. Not gonna lie. The fact that, she was worthy of Feng Bin's attention because she's pretty enough. And thus, because she was pretty enough, she was worth protecting. Taran was fobbed off. Frowning, he pondered for a moment. He said, you mean that because Feng Bin had a crush on Sha Xiaonan, he betrayed the group he belonged to? Wang Shao and the other two boys were slaves who were pushed to the limits of their endurance. Zhang Yifan also liked the beautiful young girl. Having just spent money to attain the qualifications to join the group, he learned of the news and got a serious shock and simply ran away with them before Christmas. Taran said, what were they trying to do? Didn't Feng Bin leave that letter before they left? I guess they wanted to expose this business. Feidu said, first use running away to attract the notice of society, and then, at a suitable time, go through the media to expose what was happening at Yufeng Middle School. They never expected that Feng Bin would be murdered. I mean, I don't think that's in anyone's list of expectations, besides Shanan's, of course, but... Okay, do your psychopath is showing. No, wait a minute. Taran made a slightly panicked, pausing gesture at him. Just wait. You mean that they want to expose this business so Feng Bin died and now no one dares to open their mouth? In other words, Feng Bin's death is connected to his fellow students. One of his fellow students, a middle school brat, already knows how to kill people to silence them. I mean, if another one of them knows how to bribe police officers to try and cover up a murder accomplice, then is it really such a reach? Peru turned his gaze towards the surveillance feed. Kani had been pushed to collapse by Luo Wenzhou's questioning. Tears and snivel were coming down in full force, and her impregnable dignity had vanished. I'm just a salary-earning common person. Many of the students come from wealthy and respectable families. Sometimes there's really nothing we can do about them. We can only turn a blind eye. Captain Law, have pity on us. I really didn't know. Nonsense, said Lowendraw. Gunny was a civilized person. She was scared silent as a cicada in winter by the great scoundrel Lowendraw's outburst. We now suspect that one of your scumbag students hired an assassin, Lowendraw said. The brats may not understand what degree of offense that is, but are you telling me you don't understand either? Gunny, you'd better give me an explanation, or I'll have reason to suspect you're involved in this. Fair point. Panic-stricken, Gurney desperately shook her head. I didn't know. This is unjust treatment. I beg of you, don't ask me. I really... Beidou drew closer to the security camera feed, carefully considering the female teacher's expression. She clearly knew what was going on. Wow. To have the homeroom teacher protect them like this person's family truly must be highly positioned. And possibly they have close connections to the school, a trustee or someone who donated a great deal of money. Luckily, we know someone who can counteract that potentially. I can't remember if he ends up doing that or needs to do that, but we know he can. Taran turned his head towards the report his colleagues had handed over and asked Beidou, is there anything else? There's Saranga. I've been thinking, why did they choose Shah Shanan? Beidou's index finger tapped lightly on the table. Taran thought about it. Because she only transferred in for senior middle school, her family is poor, and there is no one to look after her or support her. No, a pretty girl with excellent grades isn't a very good choice. Think about the girl you had a crush on in senior middle. Plenty of boys would like a girl like Shashanan. Rashly attacking her would attract needless trouble. So why? Hits out of nowhere in his weak points, Taran's train of thought broke off momentarily, and his speech faltered. But Beidou didn't take notice of his unusual condition. Excellent grades. Excellent grades. He suddenly paused, then went through the student reports. After transferring to senior middle school, Shashanan's first semester test scores were the highest in her grade. Beidou looked up at once. Who's second? Oh, okay, we're at the end of the chapter. Sorry, my shoulder is killing me. Okay, I think we're gonna try do one more chapter. We might go a little bit over the hour before we take the next 10-minute break, which we're definitely gonna need because I need to remember to change the batteries. Chapter 107, Verhovensky 17. Bungbin is dead. What? How did he die? Heavens! Could it be because of... Shh! The news online had spread at the speed of electromagnetic waves, instantly covering a great swath of cell phone screens. First thing in the morning, Gurney's English class was taken over by a substitute teacher. The empty seats of the absents were unusually striking to the eye. Between classes, the atmosphere in the school was extremely strange. Eufen Middle School's classroom building was luxuriously fitted up, bright and clean. The marble floor as bright as a mirror. On each floor was a school custodian wearing a standard uniform, ready to sweep at any time. The smell of the orchid-scented cleaning liquid spread through every corner. The female student was wearing a sweater and a short skirt with her school uniform casually draped over her, pretending to comply with the school's dress code. She stepped on the floor the school custodian had just gone over, her foot covered in mud, picked up from who knew where, leaving a trail of muddy footprints. Great, thank you. Oh, that reminds me of the times, like when working in retail and people would just do exactly that. Oh. The school custodian couldn't scold her to her face and could only sigh in complaint. Hearing this, the girl's steps paused. Then she spit a mouthful of gum covered in clear lip gloss onto the clean floor and stepped on it, striding away without a look back. I mean, that's not just spiteful, that's also stupid, because it's like you also now have to deal with a sticky shoe. It's not just a one-way annoyance. Clearly, she's not as bright as she thinks she is. She showed herself. She showed herself at the door of each class, not saying a word, not calling anyone. But at each class, someone came out in tacit understanding. There seemed to be some bizarre silent agreement among these boys and girls. They exchanged silent looks and went together to senior middle years 1, class 2. Year 1 class 2's classroom had the most empty seats. The main characters of the running away business that had kicked up such a fuss were all in their class. The male class monitor was standing at the whiteboard holding a marker. He was tall, thin, and upright, with one hand stuck casually in his pocket, writing on the whiteboard a notice that the Christmas activity had been suspended. He had a particularly calm and composed, elegant bearing. The girl in the short skirt waited a while, saw that he didn't turn his head, then stuck her head inside and yelled, Wei Wen Qian. All the students lying on their desks, making up sleep, were jolted by her yell, but seeing who it was, no one dared to say anything. The class monitor heard the tip of the marker paused, but he took no notice, unhurriedly writing out the last few careful words. Then he turned around and looked expressionlessly. Sorry, that was my phone that fell. Oops. Then he turned around and looked expressionlessly at the students gathered at the classroom door. He dropped the marker on the desk of the classmate sitting in the front row, then strolled out of the classroom. The somewhat fretful group seemed to find their backbone at once, spontaneously surrounding the boy named Wei Wenquan. Wei Wenquan pushed away gum that one of them passed him and nodded briefly to the crowd. This isn't a good place to talk. Come with me. The girl wearing the short skirt had reddened eye rims. The arrogance with which she'd spat out her gum had gone away. She went along, aggrieved. Wei Wenquan took them right upstairs to the locked multifunctional classroom. He took a ring of keys from his pocket and, familiarity as though he was coming home. Oh, sorry, not a familiarity, as familiarly as though he were coming home. Opened the door and led the group inside, ordering, close the door. The lock clicked shut. The girl in the short skirt couldn't hold out any longer. Feng Bin is dead. What's going on here? Why did Feng Bin die? The others looked at each other, at last turning their gazes on Wei Wenquan, none of them making a sound. All right, so he's dead, Wei Wenquan said indifferently. What does that have to do with you? But I heard Gani say that Shashaman is at the police security bureau now. Is she going to blab to the police? Another male student said with a gloomy expression. I said before that we shouldn't have chosen Shashaman But Liang Yurjing just but Liang Yurjing just had to have her. Isn't it all because she's rather good looking and did better than you on the midterm exams? I just don't like her. What about it? The girl in the short skirt screeched. She played simple and stupid all day and had all you blockheads running after her. Feng Bin was doing it, and so were you. You're outraged on her behalf now, so why didn't you run away with them? Seems someone's a little bit touchy. Who was running after her? Wei Wenqian reached out a hand, inserting it between the two of them, crisply snapping his fingers. The boy, who was about to retort, immediately came to a halt and shut his mouth, enduring his residual anger. If you're noisy again, you can beat it. Wei Wenqian looked coolly at the girl, then calmly said, Feng Bin left school on his own and was unluckily murdered out there. So what? And so what if Gurney and Xiaonan are at the Public Security Bureau? One is a good-for-nothing who doesn't dare to raise her head when the principal walks by, and the other is a nothing of a girl who wouldn't dare to complain if you slapped her. Would they really dare say anything? I so appreciate that this kid's arrogance is gonna bite him in the butt. The boy who just shut his mouth endured for a while, but he couldn't hold back. What if if there really is someone who can't hold their tongue and reveal something? Wei Wenqian slowly walked to the window and pulled open the multifunctional classroom's thick UV protection curtains. A big slice of sunlight poured in. Countless dust particles floated in the air. He narrowed his eyes idly. Isn't it enough if you guys don't admit it? Do the police have evidence? Even if they do have evidence, can they arrest the whole school? Don't worry. The police are under so much strain they have no time to pay attention to the private disputes of a bunch of middle school students like you. If they have the energy, they're better off chasing after the murderous wanted criminal. They can do both, especially Lo and Zhou and Feidu. They can do both. While the news of Feng Bin's murder had appeared in the newspaper and online, the police couldn't have revealed all the details of an unsolved case. At present, the news only said that the student who had left a letter upon running away had unexpectedly been killed by a wrongdoer. The means of Feng Bin's death and the identity of the suspect hadn't been made public. And of course, no one knew the killer who was a criminal who had escaped during the National Road 327 case. Okay, I guess it's supposed to be, and of course no one knew that it was. That's what it says there. Janae, just read properly. I'm so sorry. My bad. Let's try this a fifth time. And of course no one knew that the killer was a criminal who had escaped during the National Road 327 case 15 years ago. When the student heard his words, they froze. The girl in the short skirt hesitantly asked, "The one who killed Feng Bin was a wanted criminal?" You're not as clever as you think, sir. Like, considering the fact that you're talking to fellow kids. I'm just having flashbacks to the hi there, fellow kids meme. But considering that you're talking to kids who aren't even detectives and they picked up on the fact that you knew more than you're supposed to know, how the hell do you think you're gonna fool actual detectives with that? Of course, someone who committed a murder is going to be wanted. Wei Wenqian looked at her, not turning a hair. What's the problem? But for no reason, the girl felt a chill. She firmly shut her mouth. Just then the bell rang, calling them to class, interrupting the ad hoc meeting. Wei Wen-chun waved a hand. The teenage girls and boys didn't dare to pester him any longer. They scattered at his sign. He went last, closing the door of the multifunctional classroom behind him, planning to lock it again. The boy who had a spat with the girl in the short skirt stayed a few steps behind the others. He walked up hesitantly in front of Wei Wen-chun. Seeing his companions turn towards the stairs, he lowered his voice and quickly said to Wei Wen-chun, when Liang Yujing brought up Sha Nan, why didn't you resist? Da Ben was in a panic then. You should have resisted. Why should I have listened to Feng Bin? In his heart, Feng Bin hadn't been with us for a long time. Don't tell me you hadn't noticed. I have no objection to Shashanan as a girl, but don't you think it's convenient how she can expose the traitor among us? At this point, Wei Wen-chun suddenly laughed and patted the boy on the shoulder. You're very clever, but sometimes your thoughts go all over the place. You're better off thinking of how to deal with the police. Traitors will always have retribution visited upon them. If not now, then in the future. Who knows? Someone can take this as a warning, not follow in his footsteps. The boy understood his implication. Looking at Wei Wen-chun's particularly meaningful smile, he faintly guessed something. Disgust and fear instantly flooded him, as if his shoulder had been licked by a poisonous snake. At the same time, the City Bureau's criminal investigation team was also holding a meeting. The student is named Liang Yujing. Taran put a photograph up onto the projection screen. She does a lot of extracurricular activities, and she's good at forming cliques. She's the queen bee among the female students, but her grades have always been very good. She's always been called clever and a genius. No matter what she did, it didn't impact her grades. Guys, I'm sorry, I seem to be really struggling tonight. One thing I will credit the show for is they definitely maintained the suspense on who was the one in control a little bit longer than it is here in the novel. Like here, it's very clear who is the one in control. No matter what she did, it didn't impact her grades. She prides herself on her talent and appearance. Because Shashanan took the first spot from her, her parents thought her grades had gone down and ran to the school as though facing a great foe. They didn't accept her explanation, feeling that she'd shamed them tremendously, so she'd been harboring resentment towards Shashanan. That's what Gani told us. She was likely the one who directed the strike against Shashanan. Phone her guardians and call her in for questioning. Wenwenzhou turned to Lang Chao. Isn't Shashanan still not saying anything? Lang Chao spread her hands helplessly. Xiao Haiyang suddenly put in a word. I don't think there is any use in going at it from this angle. As long as the business of the school doesn't produce grave consequences, what can you do about things like stripping people's clothes off and beating them when so many people took part? At most, it'll be a round of collective critical education, and they didn't do any serious damage. I'm sorry, since when is the distribution of minor pornography not serious? because regardless of whether or not that was their intention, that was the result. Mm. If you call in the students, there'll be a crowd of parents and lawyers behind them. I guarantee you won't get anything. Oranjo said, What do you mean? Zhao Haiyang said, My recommendation is that we work from Lu Guosheng. Lu Guosheng murdered Feng Bin. There's no need to question that point. If we could find Lu Guosheng, we wouldn't need to match ourselves against a group of brats. But right now we can't find Lu Guosheng. Taran said. After he finished the murder at the drum tower, he swaggered off, and there was clearly someone there to receive him. Is a wanted criminal who's lived comfortably for 15 years going to be easy to catch? If we hadn't found out there was a problem with Shashanan, we wouldn't even have the lead with the students. We might be looking for a needle in the ocean. Lorenzo declined to comment, moving directly to handing out assignments. Taran, you take some people to the school to find out what's going on. Xiaolang, notify Liang Yujing's parents and get the girl over here for questioning. Feidu, if you're not in a hurry to go get back to school, could you say a few words to Shashanan for... Before he'd finished, Xiao Haiyang suddenly interrupted him. Lu Guosheng couldn't have been lying low for 15 years. Normally, when everyone was fooling around together, they'd exploit Luo Wenzhou, eating the breakfast he bought and giving their loyalty to others. But while they were working, especially when he was handing out assignments, no one would interrupt him. At Xiao Haiyang's words, absolute silence fell over the conference room. Everyone's gazes fell on him. Feidu, sitting in the corner, looked up from his phone screen. On the screen was Gu Xiao's brief and mysterious CV. Gu Zhao, sorry. Xiao Haiyang involuntarily pushed at his glasses. Lu Guosheng has been wanted for 15 years. Evidently, he's only been hiding, not had plastic surgery, and he hasn't scrubbed off his fingerprints. That shows someone's been protecting him. I investigated Lu Guosheng last night. His only close relative was his older brother, who was arrested and brought to justice in the 327 case. After that, he's only had distant relatives left who couldn't say enough to distance themselves from him. He didn't have any friends, and he didn't have any female partners he was close to before the warrant was issued for his arrest. He's an antisocial element, a bane to others' existence. Who would have that much power and dare to run the risk of harboring him? Feidu took up his words. A person who wanted to use him for something. Right. Zhao Haiyang stood up. Captain Mo, I recommend that you search through all the cases that have occurred within the last 15 years, or cases that with suspicious points, with suspects whose physical appearance is similar to Luo Guosheng, even his fingerprints. Haiyang, that's much too heavy a workload. To go through 15 years, you'd have to search through the whole file room. Meng Chao said from beside him, Anyway, aren't these all just your guesses? Even if your guesses are correct, perhaps this person who was keeping Luo Guosheng was saving him for a special occasion and hasn't used him before. Why would we set aside the lead in front of us to advance by a circuitous route, I think is how you pronounce it? Zhao Haiyang had been at the city bureau half a year, and he hadn't fit in any more than he had at the flower market district sub-bureau. He was normally taciturn and never took part in after-hour activities with his colleagues. While his work was energetic and conscientious, his thought processes were sometimes totally different from ordinary people's. His mental circuits looked like a convoluted labyrinth, and Charles' questions rendered him speechless. He stood awkwardly where he was, tightly pursing his lips. Winchell closed his notebook. From some meters away, his searchlight searchlight-like gaze fell on Shao Haiyang's face. As far as I know, there hasn't been a case involving dismemberment and digging out eyes in the city in the last 15 years. Are you really planning to expand the scope of the investigation to the whole country? Shao Haiyang, we can't muster such a large force based on your guesses. Do you have any other reliable evidence? Zhao Haiyang couldn't get any words out. Wonjo waited for him for 3 seconds. Okay, everyone move. There are many people outside scouting out the details of the case. Until the case has been solved, mind your mouths. Meeting adjourned. Everyone filled out the conference room, each hurriedly setting out their own assignments. Zhao Haiyang stood alone where he was, clutching his phone. After a good while, as if he'd come to a conclusion, he noiselessly went into the men's bathroom at the end of the hall. There were many men on the criminal investigation team, so when the place had originally been fitted up, an extra men's bathroom had been specially added in the little compartment where the cleaning supplies were kept. Anyway, normally when there was cleanup to be done, they couldn't stand to order the rare policewoman to mop up. But because this bathroom was far from the office and the space was rather small, it wasn't normally used much. Shao Haiyang opened the door and went in, cautiously determining that there really was no one inside, even opening every stall to have a look like a weirdo. Then he closed the door, got out his phone, and quickly dialed the number. "It's me, Shao Haiyang," he said in a quiet but urgent voice. "You gave me a business card last time." The person on the phone said something excitedly. "Oh," Shao Haiyang said, keeping watch in case someone came. "We have discipline here. I shouldn't be letting out information that the Bureau hasn't determined to publicize, but since an old school fellow is involved, I'll do it just this once. Concerning this case that's being so hotly debated online, the facts are more complicated than you imagine. The person who murdered the runaway middle school students wasn't some delinquent mugger with a knife. It was one of the killers who committed serial robbery and murder on National Road 327 15 years ago. The security cameras caught him, and we found his fingerprint. He's been on the run after a wanted notice was put out for him 15 years ago. No one knows how he's been hiding. We suspect that the killer specifically went after the murdered boy. That's all I can tell you. The rest you can look up the case, the 327 case yourself. I'm trying to remember because I feel like he never gave away as much information in the show as he does now here. Like his conscience got the better of him in the show, or maybe I'm misremembering. Being unexpectedly inundated with information, it could be imagined that the ear of the person on the phone was filled to bursting. A string of questions came out, shaking Officer Shao's none too durable, locally produced knockoff cell phone so it squeaked. But Shao Haiyang expressionlessly hung up the phone and noiselessly opened the bathroom door, glancing out at the already empty hall, then quickly walking out.
A moment later, there was a creak in the empty bathroom as the door of the cupboard where the cleaning supplies were being kept opened. Fedu casually flicked dirt off his sleeve and walked out. When he put his hand on the door handle, Fedu heard Lowenjo's voice saying outside the door, "You've been in the bathroom so long. Diarrhea?" A scene I wish they hadn't changed in the show, though I wonder if censorship states that media can't be bribed there. I don't understand. Fedu paused slightly, then he quickly realized these words weren't addressed to him. Xiao Haiyang's somewhat panicked voice came from slightly far off. A little. Through the door, Lowenjo's footsteps passed in front of Fedu at first near, then growing distant. Then they stopped. "I searched through your records," Lowenjo said. "Your family background is very simple. At first glance, there is nothing unusual to see. Later, I went home and thought it over carefully and found something. You have a younger half-brother, taking his university entrance exams this year. With such a grown-up little brother, you may not even have started school when your parents divorced. The materials say that your mother was regularly employed, had a source of income, and didn't have any negative records. And your father remarried. Reasonably speaking, I think your mother must have had custody of you until she died from illness. Only then did you go to live with your father. So I found a buddy who deals with household registries to investigate, and that's how it was." Shahayang said, "What about it?" "You lived with your mother for 4 years. She was busy at work. It's hard bringing up a child on your own. When she didn't come home in the evening, she'd send you to be taken care of by a neighbor. And that person just happened to be one of the criminal investigation team's elders." Lowenjo paused. "His name was Gu Zhao." There we go. Okay, so I'm quickly gonna take another 10 minutes and then we are finishing up for a final hour, more or less. So, yeah, I will see you guys then. Okay, we're back for the final stretch of the night. Let me pull everything up again. Okay, sorry. Chapter 108, Verhovensky 18. Beidou gently let go of the door handle, standing silently behind the thin door. He heard deathly silence follow in the corridor after the name Gu Zhao, as if the people outside had left. After a long time, the silent, dumb show was finally interrupted. I've never heard that term before. In a cold, hard voice, Xiao Haiyang repeated, one word at a time, "What about it?" From the other side of the door, you could hear his teeth grinding. Before Luo could speak, Xiao Haiyang aggressively launched a continuous attack towards him. So the City Bureau's criminal investigation team doesn't only screen you and your relatives, it even has to dig down into your next-door neighbors. Captain Luo, during the Great Qing Dynasty, when the emperor handed out punishment indiscriminately, I think it still didn't reach this point. Luo listened, not getting angry at him. His voice sounded smooth, and Feidu guessed that his expression also hadn't moved a hair. "Xiao Haiyang," he said, drawing his voice out, "I have provoked you and made you angry. Let's judge matters where they stand. Can we talk sensibly?" Feidu oddly rather wanted to smile, the corners of his lips turning up slightly. Then he heard Luo continue. "I don't care very much about the personalities of the people around me, and I don't require everyone to play a happy family every day. You can get along well and you can be eccentric and unsociable. It's for the best if you're willing to integrate with everyone, but if you're unwilling to have close relationship with comparative strangers, then you can do as you like. Never mind you, our President Fei's bad habits are bigger than he is, and I don't say anything about it to him." I just love the idea that he's doing this on purpose. Like it makes it so much funnier. Feidu ... Hearing this, he knew the fact that he was eavesdropping had been discovered. Feidu didn't feel like keeping up the cover up, so he simply opened the door and walked out. Xiao Haiyang wasn't very canny. Taking one look at the suddenly appearing living human, he couldn't hide his shock. He backed up a step on the spot. But Luo's expression as he looked at Xiao Haiyang became stern. "But I need you to remember where this is. Xiao Haiyang, I need you to concentrate completely, to be able to work for the benefit of all, at least during working hours, to handle the cases you're working responsibly, to set aside some of your selfish motives. I don't care what your reasons are, and I don't care what private difficulties you have. The cases that come here are all matters of life and death, with blood and tears behind them. Are you telling me only your private difficulties are worth money, while the injustices and sufferings of others can be casually brushed aside?" Luo was too skilled at flapping his lips. Xiao Haiyang was left gasping by his speech, his expression unsteady. Yeah, and the big thing for me is like Xiao Haiyang is minimizing the students' involvement in this, but at the end of the day, these students are still the reason why one of the students is dead in that ghastly way. So they bear just as much responsibility and need to be brought to justice just as badly as the person who perpetrated the murder. political commissioner law, I must interrupt your ideological work for a moment, Fedu said, leaning against the wall. Officer Shao, to whom did you just reveal the information that Luo Wusheng was the killer? Luo Zhou hadn't heard the phone call Xiao Haiyang had made in the bathroom. Hearing this, his expression altered. Xiao Haiyang, since Luo Zhou had said the name Guo Zhao, Xiao Haiyang had been like a string, constantly going taut by each sentence. Luo Zhou spoke. When Feidu revealed his maneuver, the string finally snapped. He looked up at once. The vacillating, sorry, why did that take me so long to realize what the word was? The vacillating expression left by Luo Zhou's words turning cold and hard. Is your head full of water? Luo Zhou stepped forward and grabbed his collar. A whole world of criminals are sharpening their brains, trying to hunt down information about the course of police investigations, trying to know the enemy in order to know themselves. Are you their man on the inside? Do you know what releasing random information before the details of the case have been clarified will spread false rumors among the public, even produce panic? What do you do if new circumstances turn up in the following investigation? Correct your statement? Even the weather report doesn't dare to talk so confidently now. What are you going to do with the city bureau's credibility? Xiao Haiyang struggled with all his force, but his skills were sloppy. He couldn't shake off Luo Zhou's hands, so he had to let off verbal assault. What credibility do you police have? We police? Does your salary get blown in by the wind? Luo Zhou frisked him for his phone, putting the lock screen in front of Xiao Haiyang's face. Do you want to unlock it yourself, or do you want to put on handcuffs and make me ask a technician to unlock it? Like a pitiful rat, Xiao Haiyang was nearly one-handedly lifted by Luo Zhou, looking increasingly like his head was too big for his thin neck. His stiff uniform shirt dug into his neck, and he couldn't quite catch his breath, but he continued his impertinent remarks unimpeded. Go ahead. Ask whoever you want, as long as I have time to. Before he'd finished, Feder reached out and patted the back of Luo Zhou's hand, where the veins were standing out. He recited a string of numbers. That's the password. Captain Luo, why are your means of resolving problems always so barbarian? One word. Xiao Haiyang's expression changed instantly. He reached out to snatch back his phone. Luo Zhou passed the phone to Feidu and uncompromisingly restrained Xiao Haiyang's resistance. As if it was his own phone, Feidu nimbly unlocked Xiao Haiyang's phone and opened the call log. Go through his call record, Luo Zhou said coldly. See who he contacted, and have Lang Chao and the others trace the number. If it's the press, have someone go bring their superior in for a talk. Before he had finished, Feidu, not taking orders, called back the recently dialed number. Hello? Is this Editor Wang? I'm not Haiyang. He can't come to the phone right now. Could you please tell me which company you belong to? Oh, Yan City Mass Media. What a coincidence. No other questions. Thank you. Feidu just has a different way of handling things, and I live for it. When he was finished speaking, Feidu hung up, got out his own phone, and sent Assistant Mao a voice message. Mama, say hello to Yan City Mass Media. Tell them not to talk any nonsense. I'm talking about that business of the murder of middle schoolers. Take care of it as fast as possible. Luo Zhou, ... Xiao Haiyang, ... Assistant Mao's response was quick. She immediately replied, Got it. Feidu urbanely returned Xiao Haiyang's phone to him. I just received a portion of new media stock and haven't had a chance to restructure yet. It's an emerging industry and the management is rather messy. You'll have to pardon me. Ah, okay, so that was kind of a spoiler. Oops. Zhao Haiyang spent all day living in his own world. Ordinarily, he didn't have any contact at all with Feidu and thought he was only an idle rich kid. He stared blankly for a good while, then came around instantly, becoming indignant at this corruption. He found the strength somewhere to pull Luo and Zhou away. Sorry, push, I'm assuming. Yeah, push Luo and Zhou away. You guys have clout. You're powerful. You can do whatever you want. That's how it was back then, and that's how it is now. As long as you have the power and the ability, you can smooth over a miscarriage of justice as big as the heavens, and no one will be able to comment. Isn't that right? One of their colleagues from the criminal investigation team came upstairs on some business and got this shouted full in his face, at once standing uncomprehendingly stuck in place. Passing by would be wrong, but so would not passing by. Lorenzo waved a hand at him and looked heavily at Shahayam. Let's talk somewhere else. Don't make so much noise in a public place. Zhao Haiyang thought he was going to be taken to an interrogation room. His phone call just now had in fact been pure impulse. It was Lorenzo's mind your mouths before he'd ended the meeting that had given him the inspiration. It just frustrates me because it's like I get that you're emotionally invested in these parts of the case, and yet he's still an adult. He still has to think about the consequences of his actions. He's still prioritizing his own pain above the health and safety of the general public. Because there's just so many adverse effects that releasing this information could have on not just the Bureau, but again, the general public. Imagine if Lo Gusheng, for whatever reason, panicked because his information had now been released, and he is his face can now be looked out for. Then he might start getting irrational. He might kill someone because they stared at him too long. There's so many things that could go wrong because of this, and it doesn't feel like Xiao Hangyang has taken any of it into consideration. He just feels that because the Bureau isn't doing things his way, they must be corrupt. Because understandably, he believes that there is corruption in the Bureau, but he just ends up turning everyone into an enemy, even when they don't necessarily need to be. Zhao Haiyang couldn't describe what his feelings had been when he'd gotten Taran's phone call on the way to work early in the morning that Fang Dun's murder had been discovered, and heard the description of the body with its limbs cut off and its eyes dug out. It was that person, the one he'd thought about for a decade and more, who'd vanished without a trace for a decade and more. Zhao Haiyang simply couldn't control himself. While the whole main criminal investigation team circled a crowd of rats, he would have loved nothing better than to search the whole city, grab Lo Gusheng, excavate that long, unrighted wrong. Go on. Who's wronged you? Lorenzo turned to ask him. Whose injustice has been smoothed over? Shao Haiyang only then came around and discovered that Lo Wenzhou had taken him to a discreet stairwell. The surveillance camera in the corner was turned all the way around, as though it had been made to face the wall and examine its contents, looking very comical. I mean, maybe you should turn to face the wall and examine your conscience, Shao Haiyang. That might be a little bit harsh, but still. Don't mind it, Lowenjo said without looking up when he saw him looking at the camera. We broke the camera when the Bureau was enforcing a smoking ban 2 years ago and no one's fixed it yet. Oh my word, I can't believe he just admitted that. You can say anything you like, there won't be a record. Lo Kusheng, in fact, made an appearance a year after the warrant had been issued for his arrest, in a case where the death occurred during a brawl. Forensics found one of Lo Kusheng's fingerprints. This was in Yan City. After a good long silence, Xiao Haiyang came out with this earth-shattering speech. Impossible, Wenzhou frowned. Since Lo Gusheng turned up on the security camera footage in this case, we've gone through all the materials related to him. Such an obvious lead couldn't have been left out. Xiao Haiyang sneered. That's because it was a scandal. Lo Wenzhou remembered the disciplinary resolution concerning Gu Zhao on the intranet. He froze. The lead very quickly came into the hands of the criminal policeman who dealt with the case. There were two people principally responsible for the 327 case. One, I think, was surnamed Yang. He was on holiday at the time. The other one was him, Gu Zhao. Wenjo looked at the anguish he could barely conceal, and his voice softened. Who is Gu Zhao to you? These words were like a slender needle nimbly piercing through his flesh, directly entering Xiao Haiyang's heart. He took a deep breath, looked up at the wall yellowed by second-hand smoke, and the camera facing the wall. His congealed memories began to flow. Hundreds of thousands of words came to his lips, and he blurted them out, though they were still dry. My parents started having relationship problems early. They were constantly fighting. As far back as I can remember, my dad hardly came home. Oh, my father hardly came home. He had someone on the outside. The first person who I felt was like a father to me was Uncle Boo. His mother had worked as a nurse in a hospital, one of those big hospitals where the whole world wanted nothing better than to crowd in to snatch up appointments with specialists overcrowded year-round. Xiao Haiyang always remembered her looking exhausted after working the night shift. When his mom wasn't home, she'd leave food for him, locking her small son inside the house. Once she'd left in a hurry and forgotten to put food in the small bowl. The 5-year-old boy had had to move over a little bench and pour the food for himself, wielding an enormous ladle. His hind brain was perhaps naturally imperfect. He'd accidentally fallen over along with the pot and sat on the ground bawling. At that time, the doors and walls of the old apartment were all thin. The neighbors who'd come home after work heard the heart-rending cries inside the room, got no answer when he knocked on the door, and thought there had been some accident. He pried open the door and charged in. For Xiao Haiyang, Gu Zhao coming in to investigate with the lights of the setting sun around him was like a hero coming to his rescue. Uncle Gu took care of me for 4 years, from kindergarten to 3rd grade. Composition topics for students in the lower grades are deficient. It's always something like my mom and dad or my dream. When I wrote about dad, it was always Uncle Gu, and my dream was always to grow up to be a police officer. Not gonna lie, I think I cried a little bit when I was watching this in the show. or if I didn't, it was a near thing. It's also justified the reaction by Lowenthal, whereas in the show, suspending him was a little extreme when he didn't actually do anything. I mean, I think it is a little bit extreme, but considering the severity of the cases that they deal with, I think it's kind of fair. I feel like if it was a regular policeman and not the, criminal investigation department, I might feel a little less lenient towards Lowenthal for that reaction. But yeah, don't worry about the spoiler. Just be mindful in the future. Video again showing how the rich work. Well, I there's something I enjoy so much about the fact that Fade was both the younger person in the relationship, but also the sugar daddy. Like, I don't know why I find it so amusing. Where did I? Oh, okay. Officer Gu was young and promising. He'd just become deputy to the captain of the criminal investigation team. He had busy periods and idle periods, and he was on duty often. Maybe he'd lived alone too long. He loved playing with a child. When Shah Hae-young's mother wasn't home, he'd go over to Uncle Boo's house with his little backpack on his back to hear him tell stories about arresting bad guys. After he started elementary school, the children in his class were jealous that he was always first in test scores. Somehow they'd heard that his parents were divorced and had band together using some scarcely understood insults picked up on TV, mocking him for having a mother with no father, calling him the child of a loose woman. Well, I'm gonna be so rude right now. Even though they apparently have both parents, that didn't help raise them well, did it? Uh, Shah Young had been inarticulate since he was little. He didn't know how to talk back, so he could only fight. But sadly, he had no natural gift for fighting either. Often he'd be the first to raise a hand and end up held down and beaten by a bunch of brats. On the way home from school one day, the bad kids had his head pressed to the ground, jeering that he and his mom had been abandoned. Gu Zhao was just riding by on his bike. He sturdily got off his bike, wearing his imposing uniform. He lined up the children bullying Xiao Haiyan and lectured them for 10 minutes, warning them, "If you bully my son again, I'll arrest you all and take you to the Public Security Bureau." I always fantasized about him marrying my mom and even tried matchmaking them, two grown-ups, and I made it very embarrassing for them. Later he told me that was all Later he told me that there were all kinds of people in this world, and he was the kind that would never marry, so he wouldn't have children either. So I was his son, and I had to study hard, grow up, and make money to be able to support a father. At this point, Xiao Haiyang noticed that Lo Wenju's face was a little blurry. He subconsciously wiped his face and found that he had unknowingly started crying. He was extremely ashamed and resentful. He lowered his head and took off his glasses, fiercely wiping them on his sleeves. During the National Road 327 case, I was already in second grade. I had his house keys and came every day to water his plants and read the newspaper he subscribed to. He was unusually busy then, not coming home for 10 days or more. Later, I saw reports about the 327 case in the newspaper and curiously asked him about it for a very long time. Shao Haiyang paused. Things went wrong a year later. One night, I was staying at his house. I woke up in the middle of the night and found that the lights were on in the living room. I wanted to get up and get water to drink when I heard him talking quietly on the phone to someone saying, "I know this is unthinkable, but Lo Gusheng isn't the only one there." Moonjo remembered Lao Yang's testament and his heart gave a heavy thump. What does that mean? An 8 or 9 year old boy's curiosity was at its most exuberant, and his imagination at its most abundant. But adults would often overlook his eyes and ears. Zhao Haiyang had been on summer vacation, and he had nothing to do and very little homework. He'd started his own furtive little investigation. He seemed tired and fretful during that time. At the time, all the policemen carried notepads with them. Once Uncle Gu fell asleep, and the corner of his notebook was sticking out of his uniform pocket. I couldn't resist my curiosity and stealthily took it and read through it. I saw that on a day a few months earlier he'd written, "There was a large-scale drunken brawl at a certain song and dance hall in the Flower Market district, suspected to be caused by jealousy among brothel clients, leading to the death of one person. To identify the culprit, forensics collected the fingerprints of everyone involved and the weapons used in the fight. On one beer bottle they found an unusual fingerprint, which belonged to the wanted criminal Lu Gusheng." Wardle said, "You remember everything from so long ago?" "I have an eidetic memory," Zhao Haiyang said expressionlessly. "What's more, I've repeated this in my mind over and over for years. I review it every day." I appreciate that he has the eidetic memory and not if they do, because while I would have totally bought Feidu having an eidetic memory, I appreciate that he has, like, Feidu is not absolutely perfect in every single way. We need him to have some flaws, even if they're very human, regular flaws. Feidu, who had been standing beside them in silence the whole time, suddenly put in a word. Gu Zhao said Lo Gusheng isn't the only one there. Where did he mean? Zhao Haiyang said, "A large-scale, high-quality entertainment center called the Right Bank of the Seine, also called the Louvre. The Louvre was once the most luxurious place of entertainment in the city, but there was a great fire there," Beru said. "It was said to be a problem with fire safety. There they were fined afterwards and forced to close down. Afterwards it disappeared without a trace." Lord Joe looked at one and then the other, thinking that neither of them sounded like young men in their early 20s talking about events that happened over a decade ago. They both sounded like they were enumerating their family treasures. One more word. Oh, and that's the end of the chapter. Let's go for one more chapter. Chapter 109. Verhovensky, 19. Shao Haiyang took 2 steps back, leaned against the wall of the stairwell, and slowly slid down a little. "That's right," he said as though raving. "The fire started in an office in the building's basement and set fire to some liquor-storage rooms in the basement. None of the employees on the floor had a chance to escape, and the ones who did escape were all horribly mutilated. When the fire spread, quite a few customers were drawn in too. There were countless dead and wounded. It was a huge disaster." At this point, Lowenjo thought it was sounding familiar. 14 years earlier, the great Captain China had been in his own little world, slacking his way through middle school. But even he'd still had some attention to spare to hear some news about this business. Clearly, the fire had been a bigger deal even than 911. I'm assuming they're not talking about the American 911. 14 years ago. I mean, that would kind of fall in line with 911 depending on when this was published. Quite a few people were implicated, right? Lorenzo frowned. I seem to remember there was someone from our system. Because the fire wasn't just the fault of poor fire safety precautions, Zhao Haiyang said. Supposedly a survivor who escaped the fire made a statement, saying that some higher up from the city bureaus had made an unsuccessful attempt to extort a bribe and had a dispute with the head waiter. While they were pushing and shoving, he slipped up and knocked the head waiter's head against the corner of a table, and the man died on the spot. The killer wanted to burn the corpse to destroy the evidence and didn't expect that the fire safety installations of such a high quality entertainment center would be merely for show. The liquor storage rooms were also unreasonably arranged, so he accidentally burned himself up along with the rest. Wait a minute. Lu and Zhou had had enough of Shahayang's style of talking, which was both incoherent and as fast as popping beans. He felt that the wandering he'd done in his youth, owing to his family circumstances, was still expressed in his speech and couldn't be healed. He hurriedly waved a hand to interrupt. Fedu, keep your mouth shut, don't set him running again. What do you mean? Who is some higher up from the city bureau supposed to be? Gu Zhao? What was that about extorting a bribe? How do you know? Also, weren't we just talking about Le Bouchon? How did we get here? I don't know the concrete details. This is what I put together later from eavesdropping on the people who came to investigate him. I only know that Uncle Gu really was investigating the whereabouts of the chief culprit in the 327 case, and his investigation took him to the Louvre. As for the details, he wouldn't have told an elementary school student about them. But somehow, this business turned into, oh, the pretext of tracking down a wanted criminal. Gu Zhao repeatedly extorted enormous bribes from businesses that lost control and killed someone. There were witnesses and material evidence. Shahayang's voice rolled around in his throat. It was hoarse. His tone became sorrowful. If he'd been extorting bribes, would he have been living in our lousy estate where no one even collects the trash? Up to his death, the most expensive electronic device in his house was the color TV, which he bought specifically so I could hook up a game console to it. Owenjo and Feidu, one leaning against the stairwell door, one standing in a corner, had Shahayang pressed between them. Owenjo was hearing this inside information for the first time. Struggling to cover up his shock under the unflappable expression, he silently exchanged a look with Feidu. These methods were too similar in style to the orderly deaths of the participants in the Zhao clan case, a case that in the end came to perfect resolution, with all the chief culprits properly dead, not leaving a scrap behind. The City Bureau's criminal investigation team was the elite within the system. The young and promising deputy captain doing such demented things naturally meant that those with leadership responsibilities would get in trouble. No wonder young Zhengfeng, who'd already been a full captain then, had lagged behind Director Zhang and Director Lu, his contemporaries. It turned out that the story that Lao Yang had been demoted following a disciplinary action hadn't been empty rumor, and this heinous crime had then unexpectedly led to a fire, drawing in countless innocents, bringing about an outcome that could be called a calamity. So the leadership responsibility wouldn't only have fallen on a mere criminal investigation team captain. Even the city government would have been in trouble. No wonder the Gujral business had been so severely covered up. Fortunately, the frightening internet hadn't yet taken root and sprouted within their borders at the time, and the dissemination of the information hadn't been so quick. That was why the personnel who had been drawn in for no reason on all sides had been able to hide this in complete secrecy, suppressing the whole sequence of events underground so that to this day not a trace could be found of what happened there. Filled up with a pile of moldy old news, Lowenthal frowned, chewing it over for a good while, then said, "So what were you planning? Tell everyone. Say someone's been hiding the escaped criminal Lugusheng, take the opportunity to discover events from over a decade ago, force the city bureau to investigate the matter of Gujang anew? Since you knew about the inside story, why didn't you tell me before?" Zhao Haiyang straightened his neck and sneered at him, not backing down at all. "Because I knew you wouldn't dare to investigate. With good luck, you blind cats might have caught a dead mouse, arrested Lugusheng, at best just solved the case. With bad luck, Lugusheng would get away with it again. You'd send a report of conclusive evidence to your superiors, put out another wanted notice, and count it as a solved case too. What about the injustice of others? That sounds nice. Aren't you more concerned with avoiding blame than winning praise? There were so many suspicious aspects of Gu Zhao's case, but who investigated them? Sir, be a little bit realistic, for heaven's sake. Like, if you're gonna be angry at director, what's his name? Lu? The guy who's currently not Zhang, the other guy, but we kind of sort of like a little bit. Because they're the same age, like they were there, they would know what was covered up and what wasn't. But younger cops like Lo and Joe would have no reason to know anything, and you're just assuming all of this about him. Lo and Joe crossed his arms in front of his chest. Hearing these lines, he couldn't help sighing over the passage of time. Never mind a long time ago. If someone had been standing in front of him asking for a beating like this 3 or 4 years ago, he'd definitely have rolled up his sleeves and satisfied their desire. Don't say you're different. Wang Hongliang kept everyone in the dark at the Flower Market District Sub-Bureau for so many years. Those girls dying under persecution and those drug users being ruined by their addictions, and did anyone care? Did the City Bureau care? Because Wang Hongliang wasn't stupid. He understood that this is a law-abiding society, and law-abiding society protects respectable people. So he picked poor people without any family or connections to target. The transient workers who no one saw when they were alive and no one cared about when they were dead. If it hadn't come out right when there was a conference being held, if Jingliang, I misspoke there, but we're just gonna keep going. No, we're not. Huang Jinglian. There we go. Hadn't been metal-headed enough to touch you, young Lord Law, for the Sub-Bureau's crowd of scumbags could have the Sub-Bureau's crowd of scumbags could have endured in peace until the end of the world. And where would all you emissaries of righteousness have been? I hate that argument. Like, they're human. There's only so much you can do. If you don't know about something, how the hell are you supposed to be able to do something about it? Are we supposed to hold Shao Haiyang to the standard of him catching all the criminals who have perpetrated crimes that he is unaware of? The logic is not logicking. I don't know why I'm feeling so defensive right now, but it is a little bit frustrating because it's like, what do they need to do in order for you to give them just the slightest little bit of benefit of the doubt? Because they've done a lot since you've joined the team, and it doesn't seem like it's left any impact on you. You still view them exactly the same way that you view the previous group that you worked with, and it just doesn't feel fair. Like, judge me by my own merits, not by someone else's. Sorry, that was a tangent. Law and Joe didn't respond, but Feidu frowned slightly. That's right, the murderer of Feng Bin had his parents and That's right, the murdered Feng Bin had his parents and friends to come voice their grievances, to come cry and wail. He attended a private school. His family had money and a position. Of course you'd have to attach value to that. Of course you'd have to make a strong approach of investigating and solving the case. Add some brilliance to your resume for the future. But what about Gu Zhao? He was a bachelor. His only family was his old mother, who fell ill and never recovered after his death. She died not long after. Who's going to recover after his death? Hold on. I mixed sentences. Let's try that again. He was a bachelor. His only family was his old mother, who fell ill and never recovered after his death. She died not long after. Who's going to demand the truth on his behalf? Who's going to take up the thankless task of remembering the injustice done to him? Who still remembers him? Lowendraw said powerlessly, "You." Then Feidu calmly interrupted him, putting in a word as coolly as an outsider. "Your wish to expose this makes a certain amount of sense. But first of all, you picked the wrong media for exposing it. Yan City Mass Media's main product is online media. I don't mind telling you, up to the present moment, they haven't broken through yet. That's why they want to make some big news to get eyes on them. They don't seem to be able to truly guide public opinion, and there's so much fresh news. Celebrities having affairs is more fun to read about than a murder case. Even if you could attract discussion, it wouldn't last longer than a week at most, and then it would be forgotten. And since the accusation that Gu Zhao lied about a lead in tracking down a wanted criminal and further solicited bribes on that basis is already so final, that page would still exist. You can't control this with just a few words of idle rumor online. I love how he's just systematically deconstructing all the problems with Shao Haiyang's approach. Shao Haiyang stared, looking at him through his tear-blurred eyes, not understanding why Feidu was suddenly on his side. Feidu's tone changed. "The rest you evidently understand too. Someone heard local show. To be a little unfeeling, Longden's death, while in fact very tragic, is also an opportunity for us to get at the person behind the scenes. As long as you don't alert the enemy. If you pick old sores at an uncertain time like this, startle the crafty rabbit behind it all, what's going to happen?" Thank you, Feidu, that's my point. All of Shahayang's rebukes just now had come out entirely out of impulse, but by now he'd more or less finished giving vent to his feelings, and some of his reason was gradually returning. He listened to Feidu's calm and objective speech. If I were the person behind the scenes who was hiding Logoshan, and heard that this business had made such a fuss, I'd just find some reason to kill Logoshan and deliver his body to the city bureau so they could close the case. I believe that for the person behind the scenes, this wouldn't even count as making a brave sacrifice. At most, it would count as taking off a pair of muddy socks. Feidu looked gently at Xiao Haiyang. Officer Xiao, your unconventional gambit may very well be useful. Perhaps it'll help everyone achieve a weekend where they don't need to work overtime. That's one way to give him a wake-up call. With each sentence Feidu spoke, Xiao Haiyang's face turned whiter. As for that Fan Bin, a little senior middle school student who couldn't sleep at night and slipped out to run around blindly, his death is his own doing. But since his family has money, they still insist on wasting public resources and police time to investigate the crime over and over, while the real victim of injustice is buried deep in the earth without anyone to inquire about him. Just thinking about it makes you feel very unfair, isn't that right? Feidu looked at Xiao Haiyang with a smile that wasn't quite a smile, opening the door of the stairwell. I know that Feidu would not in his life be caught being this sassy. This is much more Lo and Joel's energy. Like, Feidu is much more like just deconstructing very calmly, but I'm not feeling very calm, so I'm sorry I can't read it very calmly right now. If Officer Gu is conscious in the underworld, his resentment must be great. It's truly a pity. Xiao Haiyang said, You're talking nonsense. What? He has no resentment? Then he truly was a holy man. Since that's the way it is, for whose sake are you making a scene for here? I would feel so embarrassed if I were Xiao Haiyang. Feidu raised his long, slim eyebrows, displaying grandiose astonishment. He tilted his head and looked at him. Oh, I get it. You think you've abandoned so many things for the sake of washing away the injustice done to him, borne so many secrets, and your grievance is on your own behalf. Xiao Haiyang's speechlessness was somewhat frightened and alarmed. There's no need for the grievance to go on. Officer Gu didn't ask you to reverse the verdict on his behalf. If you don't succeed reversing it, and his death leaves you with a lifetime of reproach, it'll truly be pitiful. Why is this necessary? Feidu's painted-on smile evaporated. He coldly looked askance at Xiao Haiyang, then walked off. Lo and Zhou only then sniffed out the faint anger in Feidu's tone. It mixed with the leftover notes of the Mu Xiang he was wearing, resulting in an explosive reaction. It's, it drove itself into Lowenjo's chest, setting off fireworks in his heart. Another person had scolded him, and the person whose face never displayed his emotions had actually gotten angry. For my sake, he thought. Lowenjo pulled himself together and used a great deal of effort to hold himself back from smiling idiotically on the spot. Facing Xiao Haiyang again, Lowenjo didn't feel a trace of anger. He very genially reached out a hand towards Xiao Haiyang. Hand over your work ID and tools. I'm temporarily suspending you from duty. No objections? All of Xiao Haiyang's rage had been doused to ashes by the ice-cold water Feidu had splashed on him. His wrath cooled, but his remorse showed its head. The silly deer had involuntarily been set running again by Feidu. He thought in a panic, do I resent Uncle Wu? He seemed to be face to face with his own base soul. He stared emptily for a moment, then, without saying a word, fished out his work ID and handcuffs, handed them over to Law Windjaw, and floated off like the morning frost. Feidu went straight to see Shah Shanan. Passing the office door, he saw Long Xiao hanging up the phone and walking out. My bad. Feidu said, have you notified Liang Yujing's parents? And Chao nodded, then looked up at him, feeling a small intuition like a wild beast, sensing that Feidu was wrapped in a layer of icy shards. I want to go have a word with Shashanan, Feidu said to her, gentle and refined. Do you want to come with me? Going with a beautiful young woman may alleviate her anxiety. Not elevate. Exactly the opposite. Nang Chao, bewildered, kept pace with Feidu, tentatively saying, President Fei, it's gotten cold. Is the royal plan about to go bankrupt? Feidu didn't understand her talk and turned his head to ask, what royal plan? Nang Chao held the corners of her eyes with her fingers and gave him a smile full of world peace. Shashanan was startled by their arrival and quickly raised her head to see who'd come in, then bowed her head deeply again. Your classmate told us everything. Feidu didn't make any superfluous opening remarks on coming in, but went right to the point, concerning the hunting game on Christmas. Shashanan was taken unaware. She shuddered and looked at Feidu in a panic. Tell me what you're afraid of. Feidu looked into her eyes, clearly seeing the girl's pupils contract from nervousness as she struggled, trying to avoid his line of sight. Shashanan, look at me and speak. Thongbin is dead, and you could say it was for your sake. Your other classmates could have stayed out of it, but revealed this business to us, also for your sake. Your grandfather left home and rushed to the city bureau in his wheelchair, and is still waiting outside for news, not eating or drinking. Do you want to spend your whole life being a beautiful lantern hanging on a wall? Can you act like a person? Speak openly for yourself and for others? Oh, goodness. I love the scene with Feidu, seeing him actually lose his temper for Lawandraw's sake when he's always so calm and collected is a chef's kiss. And the way he's expressing his anger is so fascinating. It's so satisfying as well. Like there's nothing better than like when someone is angry or emotional than seeing them channel it in a very like productive and um professional and precise manner. I don't know. It's also hilarious that Lowendraw is so moved that he completely forgets his anger. How does Priest so seamlessly switch between such a serious scene and the absolute sweetness of their relationship? Yeah, it's great. I love this line. Mm. Shashanan, who before had only screamed or sat in silence, stared into space for a moment, then, without any warning, began to cry. Feidu waited for her to finish crying without making a sound. It took over 10 minutes. When the girl only had the strength left to gasp, he kept going. Specially enrolled students ordinarily have to sign an agreement with the school. You can't transfer schools, you have to take your university entrance exams at UFN, or else you'll have to return your scholarship money to the school. Is that right? Shasha now nodded breathlessly. So at first you were only trying to survive. Fairy said. Ordinarily, the person who gets chosen for teasing at Christmas doesn't know before it's publicly announced. But this time, someone told you in advance. Aside from Fang Bin, there was also another person, right? Just nod or shake your head. Sha Shannan hesitated, then nodded again. This person has more power at school than Fang Bin. He asked you to sell out the person who'd warned you out of goodwill. Or else he wouldn't only make it so you couldn't stay at school, he'd also make it you return the scholarship money. But you took that money home long ago to pay for your grandfather's treatment and cover household expenses. You couldn't return it. You could only yield. Sha Shannan clutched at her own clothing. Then Feng Bin told you his plans. He wanted to take you and the others and leave, reveal the unusual order at the school. It seems that he was planning for a very long time. You became an enemy agent among these people. He he only said he wanted to find someone to take care of Fang Bin. I mean, that doesn't spell anything good. And even if it wasn't death in the violent way that it ended up being, even if this guy went the low level route and was like, oh, I'm gonna send someone to beat Fang Bin up, that could have also resulted in death. So there's not really an excuse for her being this short sighted about it. And I understand she was put in a very, very difficult position. But I think in her gut she knew that she was putting him in a serious amount of danger even before the actual night. Sha Shannan at last spoke, in a voice as thin as mosquitoes' wine. I thought they only wanted to get someone to beat him up outside school or have the school come to get him and discipline him or something. Feng Bin was comfortably I think that's supposed to say well off. Feng Bin was comfortably well off and his parents were both people of means. Even if he'd been brought back to school, someone would have found a way to keep a disciplinary action of record. Right, Peru said quietly. But little girl, did you think about it? Even if you'd left school, you still wouldn't have been at the end of your uh, you still wouldn't have been at the end of your rope. Good and bad fortune comes in waves. In another 2 or 3 years, anything could have happened, but you may never again in your life meet another boy who cares for you so much. Oh, the scene on the show was just so intense. I'm curious if we're gonna have that same intensity in this. Like, but intense for romantic reasons, weirdly enough. Sha Shannan was once again crying so hard she couldn't speak. My child felt that even she was about to cry listening to Feidu. She quickly passed over a tissue. Sha Shannan rolled the tissue into a ball and held it tight in her hand. He he put tracking software on my phone, Feidu said. Who is he? Sha Shannan dug fiercely into her own palms, hard enough to cut the flesh. She didn't speak. Yang Chao automatically followed up. You don't need to be afraid. This is a public security bureau. No one is going to do anything to you. Who is he? Sha Shannan was crying so hard she seemed about to pass out. She shook her head. Yang Chao looked at Feidu and saw him suddenly stand up, taking off his jacket and throwing it over the surveillance camera. Then he walked over to Sha Shannan, took the business card out of his pocket, put it in front of her, leaned down, and said something into her ear. Sha Shannan raised her head and looked at him in shock. And Chow. ... Hey, handsome, taking off your clothes and seducing a minor is against regulation. It is, Leng Chao, you're right, but I don't think that's what he's doing. Fredo gave the girl an unassailable smile and stood up straight. Try me. Sha Shaman hiccuped, held her breath. After a long time, she spat out a name. It's Wei Wen Chen. Okay. I'm curious. We'll see how the rest of this session, scene goes in the next chapter, but not tonight. Um, we're leaving it here for tonight at page 211. And yeah, if all goes well, I will be back again on Thursday to continue 2 hours or 3 hours. We'll see. We're just kind of playing it by ear at the moment. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. This carried on a little bit longer than it was supposed to, but I really wanted to reach the end of this chapter. I'm very happy I did. So yeah, otherwise I'll see you guys then. 再见。